Coming up on Lawmakers, the annual Eggs and Issues breakfast highlights legislative priorities. Georgia's largest public hospital faces a fight over funding. And a proposal pushing to expand the state's pre-kindergarten program is introduced in the House. Those stories and more are coming up next.
This is Lawmakers, your source for all the news from under the Gold Dome. Here are your anchors, and Wandy Lawson and David Zelski.
Good evening. Also on Lawmakers, Decatur City Schools take the few steps to become Georgia's first charter school system.
A bill that aims to make sure Georgia drivers receive the full benefit of their insurance policies is endorsed by citizens groups. But first, our top story tonight. State leaders gather at the annual Eggs and Issues breakfast to outline legislative agendas. The annual Eggs and Issues breakfast put on by the Georgia Chamber of Commerce saw its largest crowd yet at the World Congress Center. Lawmaker Sandra Parrish was among them.
While many issues were discussed over those eggs, no one could deny the heightened tension among the state's top three leaders. It was the first time the Speaker, Governor, and Lieutenant Governor were together since yesterday's historic override in the House of 12 of the governor's vetoes.
This is not so much about making statements, but it's about making our state better. If it's about messages, then I hope they got it out of their system and we can move forward and move our state on to the things that we need to address, like water, like education, and like trauma care, and those issues that make a difference to our state.
Now, along the way, I promise you this, we're going to talk, and we're going to agree, and we're going to disagree. And it's okay. It really is okay. You want your leaders to discuss how to best go forward with the state, and then in the end, after tough discussions, we get together and we go forward.
Lieutenant Governor Cagle sees his role right now as referee.
At the end of the day, Georgians want results, and they don't care who gets the credit. They want good jobs and to be able to send their kids to good schools. When they see infighting and divisiveness, it causes questioning about our motives and doubt about our ability to lead this state where it needs to go.
I really wasn't aiming my speech at anyone in particular, more so a reminder to each of us that we have a higher calling, a higher purpose, and we need to be focused on finding solutions, not necessarily putting roadblocks. And I think that's a service, really a speech and a call that each of us need to be reminded of.
Lieutenant Governor Cagle says the Senate likely won't take up those veto overrides this week until they've had a chance to study them. Reporting from the World Congress Center in downtown Atlanta, I'm Sandra Parrish for Lawmakers.
We'll have expanded coverage of the remarks delivered by the Governor, Lieutenant Governor, and Speaker of the House later in our broadcast.
In other news, late this afternoon, the Senate Rules Committee passed legislation that expands the rights of licensed firearm owners. However, there was a committee substitute which gives supreme rights to property owners. The substitute to House Bill 89 also included a measure that would allow a licensed firearm owner to carry that firearm on state parks property.
We have an opportunity in this state to do something that we haven't done in a long time, and that is protect law-abiding citizens with Georgia firearms license permits. Those are individuals that went through a criminal background check. They went through a mental background check. They went to the sheriff's office to have that instant check done. They were issued a license by the court, by the probate judge. Right now in Georgia, if you go to the airport with your Georgia firearms license permit and you park in the parking lot to pick up a family member, you lock your gun in your car, you have violated a section of Georgia code that can make you land in jail for 20 years and a $15,000 fine. With your Georgia firearms license permit and you walk past a bus stop, just a reasonable distance in front of that bus stop in the state of Georgia, you can spend 20 years in prison. Now, my suggestion is if you see the bus and you think you're going to get arrested, immediately get on the bus. You cut your time in half. You only spend 10 years in prison if you get on the bus.
This bill has given property owners complete freedom with no responsibility to protect Georgia citizens coming onto their property, and for that reason we oppose the bill.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No.
No.
The ayes have it.
We tried to do a compromise, if you will. Maybe everyone's a little upset, but it was a compromise to try to give people with concealed weapons permits the ability to still do this, which gets down the group of people in the state down to what we heard was 300,000 people who could carry their guns on the property because of the fact that they've gone through a background check, they've had all these things, FBI background check, fingerprint, and so forth. Some of these laws, they said, were put in place in the 1870s. And we need to look at to see, you get to the case that we see all over the media of the young lady up in North Georgia hiking with her dog. It would have been nice if she could have had a gun. But yet we find out it would have been illegal for her to have a gun. And so, hopefully this takes care of some of those problems.
Now, the Senate Rules Committee substitute to House Bill 89 passed with only 2 dissenting votes. The legislation is expected to be on the Senate floor this Thursday. Senator Vincent Fort continues his fight today to keep Grady Memorial a public hospital. He was joined by supporters of this cause in a press conference which started on the front steps of the Capitol and made its way up to the governor's office. Today is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday.
One thing that Dr. King, through deed and word, held very precious was the right of citizens to petition their government, the right of citizens to protest for right. Members of our coalition, particularly ASME, has been working for several months, getting and securing signatures of citizens not only in Fulton and DeKalb County, but even beyond, to send the message to our elected officials that we must save Grady Hospital.
The people who came today believe that Grady, operating as a public hospital, must continue. Senator Fort, Reverend Timothy McDonald, and the rest of the group then made their way from the front steps, through security, up to Governor Perdue's office, with over 10,000 petitions in hand.
Thousands of petitions.
Then it was across the hall to Lieutenant Governor Cagle's office.
Thank you very much.
Then up the stairs to Speaker Richardson's office.
While we support more resources for Grady, more resources for the trauma network, more resources for Medicaid, a better formula so that Grady can get its fair share of Medicaid dollars, we also say no privatization of Grady. We say that there's a disconnect between privatization and resources. Grady needs what? Resources. And no one from the chamber on down has been able to explain to us at any time how privatization is going to get more resources to Grady.
Now, Senator Ford says legislation that could help Grady on this issue should be filed in the next few days.
Legislative efforts to extend Georgia's pre-kindergarten to include 3-year-old students began today with the introduction of House Bill 939. A bipartisan group of supporters made the announcement from a daycare playground across from the Capitol.
Georgia is one of only 2 states that invest no general revenues in early education, and now's the time to change that. We have $600 million plus in our unrestricted lottery savings account. House Bill 939 asks that some of these reserve funds be used to expand lottery pre-K money for 3-year-olds. Our draft of 939 allows the board of the Department of Early Care and Learning to decide whether or not this should be based on low-income parents only, or only perhaps on low-performing school districts, or areas of Georgia that has the highest child poverty rate.
HB 939 appropriates $25 million from reserve lottery funds to pilot a pre-K program serving at least 5,000 3-year-olds.
The inevitable question is, well, what happens to Hope Scholarship? The good news is this proposal does not in any way jeopardize the wonderful things we're already doing with those dollars. Hope Scholarship is safe and fine. The 4-year-old program is safe and fine. What this does is add to the good things the lottery has done for Georgia. We know that 3-year-old programs make a difference, and we just want to find out exactly how much of a difference they can make in Georgia, so that next year or 2 years from now, we stand before you not asking for a small project, but for universal 3-year-old programs for anybody who wants to attend.
It is absolutely imperative that every child in the state of Georgia get an opportunity to learn. And 3-year-olds, if you're a parent, learn faster than any of us. So we encourage this state to bring those kids along so that when they get to school, they'll be prepared.
HB 939 requires the State Department of Early Care and Learning to use national standards to develop the new program, as well as a way to evaluate program progress. In other education news, Decatur City Schools may become Georgia's first charter school system this fall if its application is approved by the state. Lawmakers' Bridget Snapp is live at the Capitol with more. Bridget.
In Wandy, Decatur City Schools is one of 4 school systems applying for charter status under a law signed by Governor Sonny Perdue just last May. That law allows school systems, not just individual schools, to apply for charter status. Under the new legislation, charter systems are exempt from many state and federal laws and instead are measured against standards established in their contracts with the state. The Charter Schools Act was a centerpiece of Lieutenant Governor Cagle's 2007 legislative agenda.
It says to the local school system, you design an educational curriculum around the need of your individual students. And we're confident that you're going to have educational excellence. And so those types of innovative ideas that are thinking outside the box, that ensures educational excellence for every child, and the system has to, through a contractual agreement, has to participate in that process and meet those accountability functions, I believe we're going to have a huge impact on education.
Dr. Phyllis Edwards, the superintendent of Decatur City Schools, believes the goals of her school system dovetail perfectly with the intentions of the Lieutenant Governor's legislation.
But we feel like if we could have the flexibility to move forward with the decisions that we need to make as a school system for this system, then we can be moving forward on our goals. Our goals are to improve student achievement overall. I don't know anybody that could argue with that. And to close the achievement gap, which is this is high on our priority list. This is basically our #1 goal. Our third goal is to act as a system, which if you read the legislation, I think that's basically the way this wants to go. Our fourth goal is to interact with the community, and our fifth one is to be fiscally responsible.
With only 6 schools in the system, Dr. Edwards said she thinks Decatur City Schools is the ideal candidate for charter status.
Being small and having the kinds of teachers that we have and employees, and also having the parent interests that we have. We have tremendous community support already. So I really feel like this is again, it's a good fit for us.
Dr. Edwards assured me that the school system would be fully accountable for student education without the regulation of the State Department of Education.
We have academic improvement plans for every student. I'm constantly asking principals, who are your children that are suffering? Who are your children that are having a problem? And how have you devised a plan to help them? We've already said that by 2013, we want to make sure that every child in this system is being successful. Well, how do you do that? You have to use test scores, but there are other measures that you look for. How many children are in high academic courses? That would be one. What's your graduation rate? We have those measures set out already, so the accountability was not hard for us to be part of this process.
Dr. Edwards believes the flexibility provided by the charter system model is ideal for meeting the needs of today's students.
I think high school students need a lot more time actually maybe out in the field, where maybe they might want to work. I think they need opportunities to do projects, and I'm not so sure that just sitting every child in a class for X number of minutes for so many days a year is the way to prove that you are getting the proper education. How are we going to make it active, engaging, and relevant in this time of technology and the use of technology and people used to getting their answers fast, and it's a quick society, and I think education has to change if we're going to keep up.
Decatur City Schools expects to hear whether its application is accepted in May. At that point, it may be able to take advantage of the $5 million in seed money provided by the state for charter systems. Reporting live from the Capitol, I'm Bridget Snapp.
Thank you very much, Bridget. Now, the creation of the charter system you just saw was a part of Lieutenant Governor Cagle's legislative agenda last year. So when I had a chance to sit down with him last week, we actually spoke about his legislative priorities for this session, and one of those was transportation.
We have a huge issue in Georgia, and that issue is that we are the second worst congestion problem here in metro Atlanta in the country. None of us are proud of that, and it is truly a failure of the fact that we've not been able to articulate a statewide plan, and we've not been able to reorganize the department in a way that meets the efficiencies and the effectiveness that we're looking for. We have been able to articulate now a new commissioner, and I think that commissioner is going to be able to put a strategy in place that will help us streamline the department, ensure that we get design-build concepts in place, that we begin converting some of the HOV lanes to hot lanes, managed toll type environments, to create revenue sources, but also find solutions to the congestion problems that we face. I would anticipate that once we get the department streamlined, get the department ensuring that we're effective and efficient, I believe that we could ultimately, at the end of the day, do 30% more projects on the same dime that we're paying right now. That's the type of efficiencies that we're looking for. And if we can do that, and then we put the statewide traffic management plan in place, I believe we can be well on our way to ensure a prosperous Georgia.
Now we'll bring you more about transportation challenges and proposals later this week on Lawmakers. We'd like to recommend a website that's a valuable resource for information about the Georgia General Assembly. Go to www.legis.ga.gov. That website is a great research tool we at Lawmakers use on a regular basis.
More now on this morning's Eggs and Issues breakfast. Governor Perdue took the opportunity to unveil two of his education initiatives, one to encourage parents to get involved in their children's educations, and the other to create a website scoreboard to allow schools to measure their own progress.
So my proposal to the General Assembly will be taking the less well-attended schools, the lower quartile, the most truant schools, and put a VIP recruiter in there to engage the parents, to let them know how important, even at an early age, to get those kids to school. You know, I'm a big scorekeeper. I believe what Vince Lombardi said, if you're not keeping score, you're just practicing. In education, we want to keep score. I think a good visible scoreboard is one of the best things that we can have for our state, that we can look at on an ongoing basis to let us know how we're doing. Some of those numbers, just like when I played football, I didn't like to look up and see the score, but it showed me that I need to play harder. I need to put more effort out there.
Now, Perdue also wants the state to partner with the private sector in order to invest in innovative research companies.
We need a venture capital fund here, mostly of private sector. And my proposal is that we would partner, as an equity partner, with the private sector to create a 1-to-4, 10 million state, 30 million private sector venture capital fund so we can continue to nurture these businesses that we are conceiving, birthing, and nurturing here so that they can grow up in Georgia to continue to throw off jobs that we need here in our state.
Before today's passage of House Bill 89 out of the Senate Rules Committee, Governor Perdue took issue with the measure, saying that it pits the right to bear arms against the right of business owners.
Our Constitution is great, but when we try to make one constitutional right superior to the other, we get into problems. And I know that you're concerned, as I've been concerned about that. The NRA is my friend, and I want them to continue to be my friend, and I've given them very candid conversation about what I'm telling you this morning. I'm hopeful that we can continue to work together where we don't pit people from the Second Amendment to property and employer rights. I'm hopeful that we can do that. Conversations are continuing to go on like that, and I implore both sides to come together so that we don't have to make people pick and choose about deeply held affection for our property, our jobs, our personal property rights, and the Second Amendment, which we also hold dear in Georgia.
Lieutenant Governor Casey Cagle talked this morning about his plans to help the uninsured get health care, and he brought up regional reservoirs.
Skyrocketing costs and the 1.7 million uninsured in our state represent a huge hole in our health care network. We can address these issues by addressing the needs of the indigent, as well as using the free market to put people back in control of their health care decisions. Additionally, The water crisis that we face has not been caused by the growth, but by historic drought and the mismanagement of the water resources by the Army Corps of Engineers. That's why we need to pass a statewide water management plan, and we need to expand current reservoir capacity and build new ones.
As House Speaker Glenn Richardson made his opening remarks at this morning's breakfast, he paid tribute to the former House Speaker Tom Murphy, for whom the ballroom at the World Congress Center is named.
I could not help but think at this moment in time, right here, in the Thomas Murphy Ballroom, in light of the fact that only a month ago, Speaker Murphy passed away, that we shouldn't take just a second to say, you know what? We wouldn't be sitting in this room. We wouldn't have many of the things we have, and we wouldn't have the Georgia World Congress Center if it weren't for the work of people like Tom Murphy.
Richardson also talked about his tax reform initiative and funding for Grady Hospital.
Property taxes are the 18th century way of funding government. This is the 21st century. It is time. It is time, it is time to quit taxing objects and start taxing consumption. Sales tax and consumption taxes are what we should be looking at to fund local government and to tax someone's place of abode, to tax a business, to tax inventory. I can go on and on and on. It's sad. And it's time to change it. And I am committed to leading the conversation and listening to ideas and coming up with a way to change our entire system of funding local government. I came up with a simple idea. In conjunction with the governor's super speeder initiative, I asked if we could we all just agree that if you're driving a car, that each year you pay $10 to have trauma care. It's not a tax increase, people. It's not rhetoric. It's not a game. It's trauma care. And it is time to do something. I don't care if it's $10 a car. I don't care if it's on phone lines. I don't care if it's on insurance. But one thing is clear. If you want great medical treatment, you got to pay for it. And I'm willing to lead the effort to have a trauma care network in Georgia. And I'm willing, as a part of that trauma care network, to help Grady Hospital. And I'm not going to get into a long discussion on Grady. Grady's got to help themselves first. But when Grady helps themselves, together with the governor and lieutenant governor, I'm prepared to help Grady. But we've got to do something about trauma care statewide, and we've got to get on the same page.
In other news, proponents of a total abortion ban say that more than 50% of Georgians support defining life at conception in the state constitution. The lead sponsor of House Resolution 536 came to the well yesterday to urge the House Speaker to bring the legislation to a vote.
The Human Life Amendment, H.R. 536, makes our Constitution clear that all persons, regardless of age, race, gender, health, function or condition of dependency, have a right to life, including unborn babies. As my good friend Representative James Mills likes to say, all babies deserve and have a right to a birthday. Mr. Speaker, Georgians believe that's true, and more than 50 of their representatives have signed on to this amendment because they too believe that all unborn babies have a right to a birthday.
Today, another H.R. 536 sponsor brought his perspective on the legislation.
I stand for those who are trying to come into this world. As I stand before you today, taking place in the African American community are untold millions of unborn babies being aborted today. Shame on us as a state. Shame on us as a nation.
House Resolution 536, also known as the Paramount Right to Life Act, has been in the House Judiciary Committee since March of 2007.
A law that could save Georgia drivers money on their car insurance was the focal point of a press conference held today. Lawmakers' Kiyoshi Jackson has that story.
If passed, SB 276 would allow motorists to add uninsured motor vehicle insurance on top of their liability insurance.
Under current Georgia law, unlike our neighbors in South Carolina and Alabama, for example, if the person who hits you and harms you in an automobile accident has liability coverage, what you get from that liability coverage to pay your doctor bills, your hospital bills, property damage, may actually end up being deducted from the uninsured motorist coverage that you think you're paying for.
Members of Mothers Against Drunk Driving and Georgia Watch were at the press conference showing their support for the legislation.
I'm delighted to stand here today with Senator Cecil Staten and with members of Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Georgia Watch supported Senate Bill 276 last year because this bill is the right thing to do for Georgia drivers.
SB 276 was passed in the Senate last year and is currently in the House Judiciary Non-Civil Committee awaiting review. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm Kiyoshi Jackson.
Supporters of a constitutional amendment to broaden state funding for faith-based organizations are pressing their colleagues to revive Senate Resolution 345. Here's Dunwoody Representative Fran Miller.
Representative Holmes and Lindsay and myself requested and received $50,000 in the budget for Trinity Community Ministries to provide services to the homeless. And this is a wonderful organization here in downtown Atlanta. They serve over 20,000 meals annually to the homeless. They also operate an addiction center where they've got about a 40% recovery rate. The national average is about 10%. In 2006, the state of Georgia gave them $300,000 for their capital campaign. And over the years, DCA has given him operating funds as well as HUD at the federal level. I've actually got a letter from the governor saying what a wonderful organization this is. And there's been collaboration with several state agencies, pardon and paroles, DCA, etc. And he actually gave me a name to find some additional funding at DHR. And since the city of Atlanta and DeKalb and Fulton County are not eligible to be sponsors, we went to the Atlanta Housing Authority as our sponsor. In October of this year, I got a letter from the Atlanta Housing Authority. And here's where it gets interesting. One of the reasons they said they were going to decline the grant because it could be construed as faith-based. Going forward, I guess what bothers me here, this is like the military policy of don't ask, don't tell. Unfortunately, we asked and we've been told. And I don't see how we can put money in a budget going forward until we fix this problem. So what I'd like people to do, if you would, we have a bill languishing over in the Senate for the last few years, better known as Senate Resolution 345. Bill Heath has the bill, which was Governor Perdue's faith-based initiative. And I think we need to put some pressure on our senators to pass this bill as soon as possible. We need to pass it as soon as possible. But we still can't put any money in the budget because the people have to vote on it. It's a constitutional amendment. And that won't happen until November.
Governor Perdue says he will be pushing faith-based funding again this year. Yesterday, SR 345 was returned to the Senate Health and Human Services Committee.
Coming up tomorrow, Governor Perdue delivers his 6th State of the State address. We hope you'll join us online at 2 p.m. for a live webcast of the address. That's live at 2 p.m. on gpb.org. Tomorrow night, a special 1-hour Lawmakers will include the State of the State address in its entirety. That's tomorrow night at 7. You can also keep up with all the action under the Gold Dome daily on your local GPB radio station during morning edition. All things considered, and evenings at 6 p.m. on Georgia Gazette.
And that's our broadcast for this, the second legislative day of 2008. I'm Wandy Lawson.
And I'm David Zelski. Have a great evening.
Good night.
This has been a production of Georgia Public Broadcasting.